Best known for his platform hopping, hardcore partying, go-kart driving, and even keyboard typing, the Italian plumber has dipped his feet in many genres. Though maybe not the most popular, but certainly one of my favorites, was actually Mario's take in the RPG genre. Now I know the title says Paper Mario, but before we dive into that, we have to go back to where the idea of Mario as an RPG all began. It's 1994 and Squaresoft has just released the 6th installment in their Final Fantasy series. Having built a very good reputation for creating brilliant RPGs, Nintendo decided to make use of Square's expertise to debut Mario into the realm of role-playing. According to Nintendo producer Kensuke Tanabe, it was their first attempt at collaboration, so it took quite a while for both companies to get on the same page. And funny enough, during their first meeting, Square presented an image of Mario wearing a cape, riding a horse, and holding a sword. Which makes sense, right? Since Final Fantasy is a world filled with swords and sorcery. But overseeing the project was, of course, none other than Shigeru Miyamoto. And he wasn't too happy with Mario flinging a sword around. So instead, he suggested giving him a hammer. With the cosmetic ideas coming to life, Square's next challenge was the gameplay design. According to a director from Square, Chihiro Fujioka, the team was having lots of trouble figuring out how they were going to turn Mario into an RPG. I mean, what's the first thing you think of when you hear RPG? Most will probably think, ooh, dramatic storyline, deep characters, heavy dialogue. And if you thought that, you're right. RPGs during the 90s revolved mainly around those very traits. However, Fujioka didn't want players to be constantly sitting there reading dialogue after dialogue. He wanted to keep the flow of the jumping action that Mario games were known for, and at the same time, incorporate RPG elements. What resulted was what Fujioka liked to call action events, where real-time action commands was mixed in with the traditional turn-based battles. The game was released in May of 1996 for the SNES, called Super Mario RPG: Legend of the Seven Stars. The game starts off with Princess Peach minding her own business when suddenly, day turns to night and Bowser sweeps her away. Responding to the distress call, Mario storms over to Bowser's castle for the rescue. Foiling his plans for the millionth time, Mario saves Peach? Or not? A sword named Exor destroys the Star Rod and claims the castle. Tough luck, Bowser. Mario then sets off on his quest to recover the 7 star pieces. I'm actually very glad that they changed up the story this time, instead of the same old damsel in distress story. As you take control of Mario, the first thing you'll notice is the amazing graphics. Well, at least amazing for SNES standards. According to a Nintendo Power article, the game graphics were created by Squaresoft on SGI workstations and supercomputers using ACM techniques. If you don't already know, ACM was created by Rareware, and every game that used it had graphics that blew the others out of the water. But designing the graphics wasn't a walk in the park. According to Miyamoto, the team encountered a bunch of glitches and had to dedicate extra time to make sure everything looked perfect. Recall that Mario RPG is made by Square. And who was that famous composer that works for Square? Yep, Nobuo Uematsu. Him and 2 fellow composers were responsible for the soundtrack, and some of these themes were just so relaxing, on par with tracks you would find in Final Fantasy. And of course, the battle system. I gotta say, Fujioka's idea turned out very nicely. Giving the characters real-time action commands made things a lot more interesting than what you would find in your average RPG. And honestly, if you do play RPGs, I'm sure you'll remember those ultra tedious XP grinding sessions. Not fun at all. Anyhow, this is the first Mario game to have an actual story. A beefy one at that. Funny dialogue and classic references help add life to the atmosphere. Now I know the overhead view was still a new thing back in the day, but the camera angle seriously gave me some headaches during tight platforming sections. Couple that with the D-pad. But both of these things are very minor. Overall, the game is quite revolutionary and it paved the way for the Paper Mario series. Now let's skip a whole generation ahead. Near the end of the N64's life cycle, having introduced revolutionary titles to the whole world, Miyamoto wanted Super Mario RPG 2 to be something special as well. It was then decided that one of Nintendo's internal development team, who was responsible for Fire Emblem and Advance Wars, to be in charge of Super Mario RPG 2. And yes, that's the actual code name. First order of business was settling on a graphic style. The devs broke into smaller teams and collaborated to come up with sample models. With Mario 64 being so awesome, the team had a lot of trouble coming up with something that could top it. But luckily, in comes the hero to save the day. He was the newly recruited designer Nahiko Ayama. During his break time, Ayama doodled up a concept, hoping that it would somehow serve as a kickoff point, and submitted it. Ayama recalls that realistic 3D graphics was hot stuff back then, and thought it would be unique if he combined 2D characters with a 3D environment. Well, praise the Lord, his creative idea paid off. He was invited to a planning meeting and was told to bring his picture along. Miyamoto was happy with what he saw, and I'm guessing someone was getting promoted. The game was released in February of 2001, called Paper Mario. The story starts off with Bowser vandalizing a stage play and stealing the star rod in the process. Then using his Koopa, clown, car? I swear it's usually smaller. Well, he uses it to take Peach's entire castle for a ride to the sky. Then defeats Mario and kidnaps Peach once again. The graphics! My hat's off to Ayama. I absolutely adore the paper theme. Not only did it look charming, but it also opened up a slew of interesting narratives that revolves around the second and third dimensions. Couple that with funny dialogue, it's hard not to smile here and there while playing the game. On the topic of graphics, there's actually a very weird debug room hidden in the game. And in this room, there is what appears to be a 360 tsunami radiating from Mario's body, and a lineup of Koopa Troopas waiting to be gunned down by a firing squad. But if you try talking to them, they transform into Mario's helpers. Paper Mario has many more debug stages, each being more weird than the next. Anyways, the gameplay expands on Super Mario RPG formula, adding more variety to the action events. According to Miyamoto in an interview, he thinks Paper Mario is the game that's friendly for game beginners and amateur players to start out with. Now, I wouldn't say the game is that easy, but once again, rather than testing your patience with XP grinding, Paper Mario challenges your reflexes. On top of that, the game also tests your item management skills, allowing Mario to carry only 10 at any given time. Considering this is Nintendo's first attempt at the paper style, it's hard to point out any real problems with this game. If there were, they would only be nitpicks. Shortly after the release of Paper Mario, the 6th generation of video games made its way along, and Intelligent Systems was cooking up a sequel, codenamed Paper Mario 2. During the early stages of development, Mario's character model was going to resemble his N64 counterpart, but the team decided for a sharper look with a thicker outline. This can be seen in many of the other character models too. There were a number of things taken out before the final product, such as cameos of original Paper Mario partners and a probable mini-boss called Dark Atomic Boo. The game was released in October of 2004 called Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door. Following the release of the game, things were going well until Nintendo was hit with a lawsuit 4 years later. The story is that a film company named Morgan Creek Productions sued Nintendo of using a song they owned in an ad of the Thousand-Year Door. Funny enough, the case was dropped because Nintendo actually had permission to use the song. And you know what? This also reminds me of the Donkey Kong lawsuit Universal filed against Nintendo and lost. The moral of the story is, don't mess with Nintendo. Our adventure in the Thousand-Year Door starts off with an ancient history book documenting a town that was sunk deep beneath the ground. As the years passed, Rogueport was built over it. While on vacation there, Peach buys an old map off a shady-looking woman and tells Mario about it. Mario soon finds himself on another Peach fetching quest, as he discovers that she has been kidnapped by a villain that kinda looks like Eggman. I'm not sure about you guys, but in my opinion, this is the best Paper Mario game. It's literally a sequel that's bigger and better. The devs kept the bread and butter game mechanics and added a handful of new abilities. Take, for example, Super Guard. It's a true counter that, although requires very precise timing, it gives very high reward. Every time you nail it, you just can't help but feel good. Taking advantage of the more powerful hardware on the GameCube, you'll notice that areas in the Thousand-Year Door are noticeably larger and more detailed than its predecessor. In many cases, the devs had the game break the fourth wall. Aside from finding it in the dialogue, every fight is in the form of a stage play where the audience can turn the wave of the battle. And if there was anything to complain about, I'd have to say the barrage of text bubbles after text bubbles you have to sit through. Although most conversations are still fairly charming, some just felt really dragged on. I'm just thinking, can I move on already? But if you're a fast reader, it's not too big of a problem. Well guys, that wraps up part 1 of Paper Mario. Now since you guys have been giving me so many requests for retrospectives, I figured I'd let you guys choose this time. And since there's no poll function on YouTube either, I'm gonna post up 5 games on my Google+. I'll leave a link over here and in the description. All you have to do is give the game you want to see next a +1. I'll check the results in 1 week and start preparing for it. With that said, vote away, and I'll see you in part 2.